So before we get into talking about the different types of sequences and series and patterns and rules, let's at least define and understand what a sequence or series is. So a sequence is a function whose domain is a set of consecutive integers. So the domain would be integers such as 3, 4, 5, 6, consecutive one after the other. And it says that if a domain is not specified, then we just have to understand that if it's not specified, it's understood that the domain starts with 1. So the values in the range are called the terms. So the domain are the integers, the range are the terms. And that's what it shows you guys right here. Domain, range. So the first integer, when we plug in 1, it gives us whatever the value for that term would be. So the first term gives us the value for a sub 1. When we plug in 2, the second integer, we get a sub 2, the second term value. So you have two types of sequences. You have finite sequence and infinite sequence. The only difference is a finite sequence is finite. It has a limited number of terms. An infinite sequence continues without stopping. And you guys can notice that by the ellipses in the infinite sequence there. So a sequence can be specified by an equation or rule. So for example, both sequences above can be described as by the rule a sub n equals 2n, or if you want to use function notation, f of n equals 2n. So if you guys are looking, 2, 4, 6, 8 continues on. This is your first term, second term, third term, fourth term. So a sub 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you guys are trying to relate the term number with the term value, how do we get from 1 to 2, and then 2 to 4, and then 3 to 6, and then 4 to 8? Well, you have to multiply them each by 2. And you guys can always go back and check and make sure that that does work. So if you guys were trying to find the fifth term, so a sub 5, well, if it's the fifth term, you would plug in 5 there, and it would give you 10. And that would be your next value. So it's really just trying to find a rule that relates your domain and range, the term number with the term value. So in the next part, it asks us to write out the first 6 terms of each of the following. So that's not bad. So for like letter A sub n equals 2n plus 5. If you're finding the first 6 terms, we need to find a sub 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if that's the first term, then we're plugging in 1 for n. So 2 times 1 plus 5, 2 times 2 plus 5, 2 times 3 plus 5, and I'm just going right off of the equation that they gave me. 2 times 4 plus 5, 2 times 5 plus 5, and 2 times 6 plus 5. So our first 6 terms, you just have to solve for each one. So 2 times 1 plus 5 gives us 7, 4 plus 5 gives us 9, 6 plus 5 gives us 11, 8 plus 5 gives us 13, 10 plus 5, 15, 12 plus 5, 17. So your first 6 terms would be 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, and 17. And that's all there is to it. So if we go and look at letter C, doing the same thing again, it's just that there's 2 spots to plug in your input or your n value or your term value. So still finding the first 6 terms. So a sub 1, is going to equal 1 over 1 plus 1. A sub 2 is going to be 2 over 2 plus 1. A sub 3 is going to equal 3 over 3 plus 1. A sub 4, or your fourth term, will be 4 over 4 plus 1. A sub 5, or your fifth term, will be 5, very repetitive, over 5 plus 1. And a sub 6 will be 6 over 6 plus 1. So, to find your first 6 terms, one over 1 plus 1 is a half. 2 plus 1 is 3, so 2 thirds, 3 fourths, and then 4 fifths, 5 sixths, and 6 sevenths. So your first 6 terms: 1 half, 2 thirds, 3 fourths, 4 fifths, 5 sixths, and 6 sevenths. So it's really nice if they give you the rule, because then all you guys have to do is plug them in. So go ahead. You guys can try the other one. I'm going to keep on moving along. When it asks you guys to describe a pattern, and then it wants you to write the next term and write the rule for the nth term of the sequence, when you guys are trying to come up with a rule, sometimes it's just a matter of really looking at what you have and connecting between what you have and what you're trying to get to. So if we look at the first one, I always like to write my terms down, or label my terms rather. So for the first one, you have -1, -8, -27, -64. So -1 is your first term, -8 is your second, -27 is your third, -64 is your fourth. So those subscripts, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are your term numbers. So we're looking at them and thinking, okay, how do I get from 1 to -1, from 2 to -8, from 3 to -27, and from 4 to 64. So there has to be some sort of pattern there. And if you're thinking, well, you just cube them, okay, that's good. How do they become negative? Right now, my subscript is technically a +3. Well, you have to make it a negative value. So, and if you guys are having trouble, make a rule, see if it works. If it doesn't work, okay, then try something else. But in this case, -1 cubed equals -1. -2 cubed equals -8. So these are my n values. So to get where we're trying to be, your n value, or your term value, is going to equal the negative value of whatever that term is to the third power. So a sub 5 would equal, okay, -5 to the third power, which is -125, which would make sense to be your next term. So if we look at letter B, we're trying to figure out, and I sort of wrote it down there at the bottom, we want to figure out how to use the term number to get to the term value. So like for letter A, how did we get from term 1, so 1 to -1, 2 to -8, 3 to -27. We're using the term value because that's how we write the rule, but we need it to equal the value of that term number. So 0 is your a sub 1. So how do we get from 1 to 0? How do we get from 2 to 2? 3 to 6, 4 to 12. So in your head, you might be thinking that you understand that 1 times 0 is 0, or that 2 times 1 is 2. You might know that 3 times 2 is 6, and 4 times 3 is 12. So we're really looking at the term values and figuring out how we got to 0, 2, 6, and 12. So I know that it is my term number times these values, but how does 0 and 1 and 2 and 3 relate to the term number? How does 0 relate to 1? How does 1 relate to 2? 2 relate to 3? 3 relates to 4? It's all of them are one value less than what it's being multiplied by. So we're going to take the term number. So like, for instance, here, we take the term number, which is 4. It's the 4th term, and multiply it by 1 less than that, which is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So A sub n equals n times n minus 1. That's going to be your rule. So A sub 5, or your 5th term, will equal 5 times 4, which is 20. So we need to figure out how to use the term number to get us to the term value, what it actually equals. So none of them are going to be exactly the same. You're going to have to look and try to find a pattern. It's just sort of about critical thinking. And yes, you might have to sit there for a minute until you come up with it. But the good thing about these is that you can always check to see if what you come up with works.